The thing about the end of the world is that someone, somewhere, always brings a clipboard. My personal apocalypse, codenamed Hurricane Amelia, was currently turning my meticulously zoned suburban street into a tributary of the Mississippi. And sure enough, there was Carol, HOA president and chief executioner of Joy, marching across the saturated lawn with a clipboard in a Ziploc bag. Her target, Dave Miller's bright orange evacuation raft. I was technically on a Zoom call, listening to my boss drone on about Q4 synergy, but my webcam was off and my attention was 100% focused on the window. This was a pay-per-view event. Carol was a force of nature more terrifying than the hurricane. She was a woman who operated on the principle that if a rule wasn't being enforced, it might as well not exist. In the 3 years I'd lived in Maple Creek Estates, a name that was becoming tragically ironic by the second, I'd compiled a mental list of her greatest hits. There was the time she measured my lawn with a ruler and issued a $25 fine because the grass in one patch was a 1/4 inch over the mandated 3-inch limit. Then there was the formal complaint she filed over my welcome mat. It read, "Come back with a warrant," which she deemed aesthetically hostile to community cohesion. My personal favorite, though, was the Great Mailbox War of 24, a 3-week-long email chain with 27 replies, all about the officially approved shade of taupe for mailbox posts. She had included paint swatches in an attachment. So seeing her march into the teeth of a Category 2 hurricane to enforce a bylaw wasn't just believable, it was inevitable. Dave Miller was the polar opposite of me. He was a joiner. He organized the neighborhood block party, remembered everyone's birthday, and actually enjoyed neighboring. He was an aggressively nice guy with a wife, Sarah, who was just as pleasant, a 7-year-old daughter named Lily, and a golden retriever named Gus, whose only crime was an excess of affection. They were the perfect family, which, in Carol's eyes, made them the perfect targets for her bureaucratic wrath. The raft they were preparing wasn't a toy. It was a serious, 6-person heavy-duty inflatable designed for exactly this kind of disaster. Our cul-de-sac was at the bottom of a gentle slope, the first place to go when the creek, from which our neighborhood presumably got its name, decided to reclaim its ancestral lands. The evacuation order had been issued 2 hours ago. The street was already a sheet of murky water, bubbling up from the storm drains. The time for packing the minivan was long over. The time for boats had arrived. "Sorry guys, gotta drop," I said into my headset, my eyes locked on the drama. "The apocalypse is starting and our HOA president is trying to issue a ticket to God." I clicked "Leave meeting" before anyone could respond. I slid my window open a crack. The roar of the wind and rain flooding my office. Carol had reached her destination. She stood, feet planted in the squelching turf, rain dripping from the brim of her absurdly yellow raincoat, and tapped her pen on the Ziploc-protected clipboard. "David!" she yelled, her voice a shrill counterpoint to the storm's bass rumble. Dave, who was securing a waterproof duffel bag to the side of the raft, straightened up slowly. He looked like a man who had been pushed 1 inch past the edge of his patience. "Carol, you cannot be serious right now." "I am always serious when it comes to the integrity of this community," she shot back, completely unironic. "The bylaws are perfectly clear. Section 9, subsection 4B. No watercraft, including but not limited to boats, jet skis, or canoes, may be stored in public view on any residential property." Dave just stared at her. He blinked, wiping rain from his face. "Carol, for the love of God, it's a hurricane. This is an evacuation raft. The street is about to become a river." "The bylaws do not make exceptions for inclement weather, David," she said, puffing out her chest. "An unapproved alteration to the community landscape is an unapproved alteration. You have 15 minutes to deflate and properly store this item, or the fines will begin to accrue. Daily. Sarah came to the front door, Lily hiding behind her legs, clutching Gus's collar. "Carol, please," she shouted. "We have to leave. The water is already over the curbs." Carol didn't even glance at her. Her focus was entirely on Dave and the offending orange watercraft. It was a battle of wills. Dave, a decent man pushed to the brink, versus Carol, an immovable object of pure, distilled pettiness. I was betting on pettiness. It has a longer shelf life. Dave threw his hands up in exasperation. "Fine me, Carol. Fine me into oblivion. I don't care. We are leaving." He turned his back on her and went back to the raft, a clear signal that the conversation was over. It was a fatal miscalculation. Carol's face tightened. The rain, the wind, the impending flood, none of it mattered. What mattered was that her authority had been challenged. "I warned you," she hissed. Her voice barely audible over the storm. She reached into the deep pocket of her raincoat and pulled out something that glinted dully in the gray light. A box cutter. My brain stalled for a second. No way. Even for her, this is... No. But it was. Before Dave could react, she lunged forward with a surprising agility. There was a sharp, grating sound, like a zipper being violently torn, followed by a long, wheezing sigh. A massive 10-inch gash appeared in the side of the miller's raft. It sagged, folded in on itself, and died on the lawn with a pathetic, gassy exhale. Silence. The roar of the storm seemed to fade into the background. Dave and Sarah stood frozen, their faces masks of stunned disbelief. Little Lily started to cry. Gus started barking, a frantic, helpless sound. Carol stood over the carcass of the raft, her chest heaving, the box cutter still in her hand. She looked down at her handiwork, a flicker of something, maybe even shock at her own actions, crossing her face before it was replaced by a grim, tight-lipped satisfaction. I dropped my half-eaten bag of popcorn. This wasn't funny anymore. This had crossed a line from petty tyranny into genuine, certifiable malice. She had just trapped a family, a child, in a flood zone. For what? A bylaw? A cold, clear rage settled over me, and with it, an idea. A beautiful, stupid, magnificent idea. I turned from the window and sprinted towards the one place in my house that held the solution: the garage. My garage is a carefully curated museum of impulse buys and questionable hobbies. Nestled behind the lawnmower and a stack of old tech I swear I'll recycle one day was a large, unassuming cardboard box. I hadn't looked at it in 2 years. Its label read, "Go Floats Flamingo Party Island, Seats 8. I had bought it on a Black Friday deal for a lake trip with friends that promptly fell through. It was a gag purchase, an 8-foot-wide, aggressively pink, inflatable flamingo. It was absurd. It was obnoxious. It was everything Carol hated. It was perfect. With a surge of adrenaline, I ripped the box open, the screech of tearing cardboard a war cry. I hauled the mass of pink vinyl, heavier than I remembered, through the house and out onto my driveway, right in Carol's line of sight. The water was already swirling around my ankles. I unrolled it, a garish splash of neon against the gray deluge. Then I grabbed my electric air pump, the one I use for air mattresses. The one that sounds like a 747 taking off. I jammed the nozzle into the flamingo's valve and flipped the switch. The pump roared to life, a deafening shriek that cut through the storm. And the flamingo began to rise. It was a glorious, obscene spectacle. A massive, bubblegum pink bird, complete with a goofy expression and a ridiculous, looping neck, inflating in the middle of a hurricane. It was an act of inflatable insurrection. Carol spun around, her face contorting from smug satisfaction to pure, unadulterated fury. Dave and Sarah stared, their despair momentarily forgotten, replaced by sheer confusion. "Hey, Carol!" I bellowed over the pump, my voice hoarse. "Is this one okay with you? It's a temporary lawn ornament until the lawn is underwater, at which point it becomes a novelty flotation device." "Check your bylaws. I'm pretty sure there's a loophole for mythical birds." A slow grin spread across Dave's face. It was the grin of a man who had just been handed a lifeline. He looked at me and gave a sharp, determined nod. The spell of shock was broken. "Sarah, get Lily and Gus!" he yelled. While the flamingo reached its full, majestic girth, I ran back inside and grabbed the paddles I'd bought with it, along with my own waterproof go-bag. I tossed them to Dave. They scrambled onto the flamingo's back. It was ludicrously spacious. Lily, her tears forgotten, actually giggled as she sat down next to the bird's giant plastic head. Gus the retriever, looking utterly bewildered but game for anything, hopped aboard and promptly shook water all over them. "High ground is the elementary school, about a half-mile up the main road," I shouted. "Stay in the middle of the street. You'll avoid the worst of the debris." Dave gripped my hand, his handshake firm. "Leo, I don't know what to say. Thank you." "Don't mention it," I said, grinning back. "Just do me a favor and get a picture of Carol's face when you float past." He laughed, a real, genuine laugh. They pushed off from the curb, the giant pink flamingo bobbing gracefully onto the newly formed Maple Creek River. A family, a dog, and their worldly possessions, saved by an instrument of pure spite. I stood on my porch, ankle-deep in the rising flood, and watched them go. Then I turned to look at Carol. She was just standing there, drenched and defeated, as a massive pink flamingo carrying the very family she'd tried to condemn floated away to safety. Her mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. For the first time since I'd met her, Carol was speechless. The water was rising with a speed that was genuinely alarming. The playful stream in my driveway was now a determined current, tugging at my shins. My own front door was a waterfall. Time to go. I waded back into my garage, the water now knee-deep, and unhooked my own escape vehicle from the wall. It was a practical, boring, one-man inflatable kayak. No flamingos, no party islands, just sensible, life-saving vinyl. I grabbed my go-bag, a compact 72-hour kit I'd assembled with grim satisfaction years ago, and a paddle. Launching a kayak from your own front porch is a surreal experience, let me tell you. One moment you're standing where the Amazon guy usually drops off your packages. The next you're afloat in a brown, swirling mess. The world had been transformed into a bizarre water park. The meticulously curated landscapes of Maple Creek estates were gone, replaced by a churning expanse of muddy water. The tops of prize-winning rose bushes poked through the surface like desperate, thorny hands. Garden gnomes bobbed past with cheerful, vacant expressions, their little red hats ridiculously jaunty for the circumstances. I saw a Weber grill drift by, followed by a flotilla of plastic Adirondack chairs. It was suburbia, liquefied. Paddling down the center of my street was disorienting. I had to navigate by the rooftops. The current was deceptively strong, trying to pull me towards submerged cars and fences that could easily snag the kayak. This wasn't a joke anymore. It was actively dangerous. The humor of the flamingo incident was fading, replaced by a cold, prickling awareness of my own vulnerability. I covered it the only way I knew how, with a running internal commentary of pure sarcasm. "Well, Leo, you always wanted a waterfront property. Look at you now, living the dream." As I rounded the corner onto the main neighborhood artery, I saw the flashing lights. It was a police airboat, its massive fan churning the water into a frenzy as it slowly made its way down the street. 2 officers scanning the houses. I waved my paddle frantically. The boat slowed, its wake rocking my tiny kayak violently. An officer with a grim face and an exhausted expression leaned over the side. "Sir, you need to get to the shelter at Northwood Elementary. We're clearing this sector. The water's still rising," he yelled over the engine's roar. "Copy that, on my way," I shouted back. "Hey, quick question. Are you guys taking reports, or should I wait until things are less moist?" The cop gave me a look that was equal parts pity and annoyance. "What kind of report?" "Destruction of private property, reckless endangerment. My neighbor's HOA president slashed their evacuation raft with a box cutter about an hour ago." The officer didn't even blink. He'd clearly heard it all today. "Get on the list, buddy. Right now, our only priority is saving lives. Yours included. Get to the school." He pointed the way, and the airboat roared off, leaving me bobbing in its wake. So much for immediate justice. I kept paddling, the repetitive motion a grim comfort. That's when I passed Carol's house. It was a 2-story colonial, set on a slight rise that had bought her a little more time than the rest of us. She was standing on her 2nd-story balcony, the one with the perfectly symmetrical potted ferns, holding her phone to her ear. Even from 50 yards away, I could see she was yelling into it, probably trying to report me for my unapproved kayak and for aiding and abetting the flamingo escapees. She saw me. Her arm shot out, and she pointed, her face a mask of rage. I couldn't hear what she was screaming over the wind, but I could guess. It was probably something about bylaw violations. I gave her a big, cheerful wave, blew her a sarcastic kiss, and paddled on. It felt good, really good. The further I got, the more the scale of the flood became apparent. The water was deeper here, the current faster. A submerged minivan created a dangerous whirlpool that I barely managed to avoid. A floating log, probably from someone's decorative firewood pile, slammed into the side of the kayak, making my heart seize. My earlier bravado was completely gone, replaced by a primal focus on one thing: getting to the school. I was almost there. I could see the traffic lights of the main road hanging uselessly over the brown river. The school was just beyond it, on a proper hill. Safety. 20 more minutes of paddling, maybe less. Then I heard it. A scream. It wasn't a generic cry for help. It was high-pitched, laced with a familiar, grating note of panic and indignation. I stopped paddling, letting the kayak drift as I listened. It came again, carried on the wind from the direction I'd just come. "Help! Somebody help me!" I turned the kayak around. My heart sank. There, in the distance, was the roof of Carol's house. Her balcony was gone, completely submerged. And clinging to the very peak of her roof, like a terrified gargoyle, was Carol. In one arm, she was desperately clutching a huge, fluffy white Persian cat. My first entirely honest instinct was a wave of pure, unadulterated schadenfreude. Well. Look what the cat dragged in, or onto a roof as the case may be. My internal monologue went into overdrive. This is it. This is cosmic karma served up on a shingle. She endangered a child. She deserves to sit up there and think about what she's done. Let her wait for the professionals in the airboat. They've got a list, and she's at the bottom of it as far as I'm concerned. I actually started to paddle away. I did. I got about 10 feet. Then the cat let out a pathetic, watery meow, and Carol screamed again. This time the sound was different. The anger was gone, replaced by the raw, ragged terror of someone who genuinely believes they are about to die. I let out a string of curses that would have earned me a lifetime of HOA fines. My conscience, the annoying, persistent little jerk, had kicked in. I couldn't leave her. I couldn't leave the damn cat. Paddling back against the current was a Herculean effort. Every stroke was a negotiation with the flood. By the time I reached her house, my arms were burning and I was panting. Carol was a mess. Her perfect blonde hair was plastered to her skull. Her face was streaked with tears and rain, and she was shivering violently. The rescue was, without exaggeration, the least dignified event of my entire life. "Oh, thank God," she cried when she saw me. Then, her survival instinct was immediately overridden by her manager instinct. "Come around to the west side of the roof. The current is weaker there. And be careful, my prize-winning azaleas are submerged just below you." "Carol," I yelled, struggling to keep the kayak from being slammed into her chimney. "Your azaleas are currently a sushi buffet for minnows. Can you get down or not?" The cat, whose name I would soon learn was Mr. Fluffington, was not helping. It was a fluffy, white ball of pure panic with claws like fishhooks. Getting Carol off a slippery, pitched roof and into a wobbly, one-man kayak was a physics problem I was not equipped to solve. "I'll slide down to the gutter," she announced. "That's a terrible idea." She did it anyway, sliding down the shingles in a graceless heap and landing hard in the gutter, which thankfully held. Now she was closer, but the real challenge began. She had to essentially fall into the kayak while I tried to keep it steady. "Okay, on 3, I grunted, my muscles screaming. 1, 2... She didn't wait for 3. She just sort of let go. She and Mr. Fluffington landed in the kayak with a tremendous splash, sending a tidal wave over the sides and nearly capsizing us. The kayak groaned under the new weight. We were dangerously low in the water. Mr. Fluffington, having decided I was the source of all his problems, launched himself at my face. I threw up an arm to block him, and his claws sank deep into my forearm. I yelped, a sharp, undignified sound. "Mr. Fluffington, no! Bad boy!" Carol chided, as if her cat had just knocked over a glass of milk. "Your cat is trying to kill me, Carol," I gritted out, trying to regain control of the paddle with one hand while my other arm bled freely. The journey to the main road was the most awkward 10 minutes of my life. The kayak was sluggish and unstable. My arm throbbed, and Carol, dear Carol, was a terrible passenger. "Are you sure you're paddling correctly?" she asked, clutching her demonic cat to her chest. "It feels very inefficient." "I'm open to suggestions, Carol." "And this vessel is highly inadequate. It's leaking," she complained, pointing to the water sloshing around our feet. "That's not a leak. That's from when you belly flopped into it," I snapped. "My tax dollars pay for a proper rescue service, you know?" That was it. I stopped paddling and let the kayak drift. I turned to look at her. "Carol, let me be perfectly clear. My Amazon Prime membership paid $89 for this vessel. It is currently the only thing keeping you and your prize-winning Hellcat from becoming part of the local ecosystem. So, with all due respect, please shut up and let me paddle." For once, she was silent. She just looked at me, her eyes wide. And in that moment, as we floated past a completely submerged Prius, its roof barely visible, the absurdity of our situation seemed to hit us both. The HOA president and the welcome mat rebel huddled together in a cheap kayak with a traumatized cat, adrift in the ruins of our neighborhood. The fight just seemed to drain out of her. She was quiet for the rest of the trip. The only sound was the rain, the paddle dipping into the water, and the occasional hateful hiss from Mr. Fluffington. The Northwood Elementary School gym was organized chaos. It smelled of wet clothes, instant coffee, and fear. Cots were lined up in neat rows on the basketball court, manned by Red Cross volunteers. A cacophony of crying babies, hushed conversations, and the hum of generators filled the air. As soon as we stumbled through the doors, a volunteer rushed over with blankets. And then I saw them, the Millers. They were huddled together on a cot, Gus lying at their feet. When Dave saw me, his face broke into a massive grin of relief. "Leo, you made it, man!" he said, rushing over to clap me on the shoulder. Sarah was right behind him. "Oh my God, we were so worried! Your arm!" She was a nurse, and her professional instincts kicked in immediately. She steered me towards a first aid station, ignoring my protests that it was just a scratch. Then they saw who I had with me. Their faces froze. Dave's expression hardened. "What is she doing with you?" Carol, wrapped in a red blanket and still clutching Mr. Fluffington, refused to meet their eyes. "Her house went under," I said simply. It was all the explanation I could offer. After a medic cleaned and bandaged my arm, pronouncing that Mr. Fluffington had, in fact, done a real number on me, I saw a police officer setting up a small table near the entrance. He was taking statements, a grim-faced scribe documenting the small and large tragedies of the day for insurance purposes and potential legal action. This was my chance. "Come on," I said to Dave. "Let's go make a report." We stood in a short line of dazed-looking homeowners. When it was our turn, I let Dave do most of the talking. He calmly and factually recounted the entire incident, the confrontation, Carol's quoting of the bylaws, and the moment she pulled out the box cutter and deliberately destroyed their only means of escape. "And you saw all this?" the officer, a tired-looking man named Peterson, asked me. "Clear as day from my office window," I confirmed. "I saw her slash the raft. 10-inch gash, at least. They were stranded." Peterson wrote everything down in a small, waterproof notebook. "And your raft, Mr. Miller. Do you have a receipt for it? Model number?" "At the bottom of the creek, probably," Dave said with a sigh. "But yeah, I have the receipt in my email. It was an Achilles LSR 310. Cost about $1,500. Just then, Carol, having deposited her cat with a harried-looking volunteer, strode over to the table. She had regained some of her composure and all of her indignation. "Officer, I'd like to file a report of my own," she announced. Peterson looked up, his face impassive. "Regarding?" "Regarding him," she said, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He has had it out for me for years. His welcome mat is a public nuisance. He launched an unapproved, garishly colored flotation device from his property in clear violation of—" "Ma'am," Peterson interrupted, his voice flat. "We're dealing with a natural disaster. I don't care about his welcome mat." "But he's twisting the story," she insisted. "That other raft, it was a safety hazard. It wasn't properly secured." As if on cue, Mr. Henderson, a quiet retiree from 2 doors down, shuffled over. "Excuse me, officer," he said in his soft voice. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I saw the whole thing from my upstairs window. What this young man here is saying," he nodded at Dave, "is exactly what happened. She cut their boat. On purpose." Peterson's gaze shifted to Carol. The professional indifference was gone, replaced by a hard, analytical stare. He slowly closed his notebook. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me. We have a few more questions for you." He led her away towards a quieter corner of the gym. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but we saw Carol's face crumble. The blustering authority vanished, replaced by the pale, slack-jawed look of someone who was finally, truly, facing consequences. The words, "reckless endangerment during a federal state of emergency," have a certain weight to them, I imagine. The next few days in the shelter were a blur of bad coffee, shared stories, and endless waiting. But amidst the chaos, a strange sense of community formed. We weren't just addresses on a street anymore. We were survivors. I spent most of my time on my laptop, which I'd had the foresight to bring in my go-bag. I started hearing horror stories from other neighborhoods, contractors demanding huge cash deposits up front and then vanishing, insurance adjusters giving people the runaround. So I started doing what I do best: research. I built a spreadsheet. I compiled lists of reputable, licensed, and insured local contractors. I added a second sheet for the scammers and price gougers, based on reports from community Facebook groups. I included links on how to file claims with FEMA and what to say to your insurance company. I printed out a few copies and pinned them to the gym's bulletin board under the heading, Maple Creek Post-Flood Resource List. People noticed. They started coming to me asking questions. For the first time, I wasn't just the snarky guy with the hostile welcome mat. I was a resource. I was helping. It was a weird feeling, but not a bad one. 1 month later, the world smelled of mud and sawdust. The flood was gone, but it had left a brown bathtub ring 10 feet high on every house in our cul-de-sac. The sound of the storm had been replaced by the roar of dehumidifiers and the whine of power saws. Huge dumpsters sat in every driveway like monuments to our collective loss. I was over at Dave's place, wearing a respirator and helping him tear out a section of ruined drywall. We'd become friends, bonded by trauma and flamingos. My own ground floor was gutted, but his had been worse. "I'm telling you, that contractor you found is a lifesaver," he said, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "The guy next door, the one who hired the first crew he found, they took his 10 grand deposit and he hasn't seen them since. That's why you read the reviews," I said, prying another chunk of soggy plaster off the studs. "You saved us again, man. First from the flood, then from the vultures." He looked at me, his gratitude real and humbling. We took a break, sitting on his porch steps and drinking lukewarm water from bottles. That's when we looked over at Carol's house. The lawn was a dead brown mat. The prize-winning azaleas were skeletal sticks, and planted right in the middle of it all was a large, garish "for sale" sign. "Heard anything?" I asked. Dave took a long drink of water. "Oh yeah," he said with a grin. "Henderson has been keeping a scorecard. The DA's office is hitting her with a felony charge for reckless endangerment. My insurance company is suing her personally to recover the cost of the raft and some of the initial damages. And the HOA board held an emergency meeting via Zoom last week. The vote to remove her as president was, and I quote, enthusiastically unanimous." We both just sat there, savoring the moment. It wasn't a cheer-worthy victory. It was just quiet justice. A fittingly bureaucratic end to her reign. Just then, Mr. Henderson, the newly appointed interim HOA president, ambled over. He was a chill, retired history professor who mostly cared about his bird feeders. He was holding 3 bottles of beer. "Figured you two could use something better than water," he said, handing them to us. "Official business." We clinked bottles. Henderson walked over to the community message board at the entrance to the cul-de-sac. He took down the old, water-stained notice about lawn maintenance and tacked up a new, freshly laminated sheet of paper. Curious, Dave and I walked over to see what the new regime had in store. Was it a new rule about mailbox colors? A mandate on dumpster placement? We got to the board and read the sign. It was a single, elegant sentence typed in a large, friendly font. Maple Creek Estates, new community guideline #1. In case of emergency, please disregard all previous guidelines. Just be good to each other. I looked at the sign. I looked at Dave, who was smiling. I looked at the street, filled with neighbors helping neighbors haul debris and share tools. It was a mess. It was chaos. But it was a community. I took a long swallow of beer. It tasted like victory. "Huh," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Maybe a little neighboring isn't so bad after all." Dave laughed. "Don't tell me you're going to get a new welcome mat." "Let's not get crazy," I said. "I'm still keeping the mat.